Okay, welcome to the Gut Clubs. I think this might be our 10th podcast, and today we have a very special guest. Paul McCartney is here. Cue the music, Magneto and Titanium Man. Oh, wait a minute. It's not Paul McCartney. It's Steven Wright from the Healthy Gut Company. That's even better. Steven, welcome. Welcome
Hey
to the Gut
Keith,
Club.
thanks for having me.
Thanks for send me an invoice for that cheesy opening.
For sure.
So today we're going to be talking about magnesium, and that is really a wide open subject. I think, scientists these days don't even understand completely the mechanism, as if we can understand mechanism of anything. But magnesium, you know, is still something we know an awful lot about. We're going to be covering a lot of territory from what I like to call the microbiota gut centric view. The Gut Club, as you know, is microbiota centric. Um, um, and there's a lot of protection that can be had by magnesium, quite a lot of benefit. We'll be going over some of those details. But magnesium in general is well known to activate enzymes. I mean, what's your story with this product, Magnesium HP? That's what we're going to be promoting today, um, which is now my favorite form of magnesium after using it for several months. First of all, what's the HP stand for?
Just high potency because
Mm-hmm.
we were able to create, like, if you were to compare this to, say, pure encapsulations magnesium glycinate, where you have 50% more active ingredient per capsule, and we have less flows and fillers. We don't have any. They actually do. So more pure than pure.
Okay. My background with the product is I was using for probably at least a decade a fan of magnesium chloride. Um, I was a little, embarrassed to admit how I was doing it. I was using pure flakes of magnesium chloride and then letting it dissolve in water. It was quite cost effective and also effective on, on my health. I was really a big fan of mag chloride. But then I started looking into the glycine bound magnesium, and I was really happy to see that you began producing it. When did you launch this product?
Oh gosh, maybe 2 years ago now. Right
Okay,
around, yeah, right around 2 years ago.
okay. So you must have been doing a lot of research yourself. What's your history with magnesium?
My history as a general person, and a wellness warrior, or something like that, or somebody who cares about their health, is I had used various types of magnesium on and off throughout the years. Like the amount of data suggesting our soils are low in magnesium, and that magnesium deficiency could be a problem for like all different types of uh, just generalized, like, how good do you feel? Like, are you performing at your best? All the way down to like actual diseases, was like, yeah, you should probably have some magnesium. But I would just gravitate to the one that was like the in vogue. So, for a while there, everybody was into magnesium threonate. So I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be the brain magnesium, and I'm gonna take
Oh
this.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
it didn't do anything for me. Like, I've tried a liposomal, I've tried different forms of it, and
Hmm.
I don't notice anything at all. And so, I've just used various forms. At the end of the day, magnesium glycinate has always been my favorite form after some early, experiments gone wrong with like natural calm or the magnesium citrates. And so I've just used that preferentially on and off throughout the years,
Hmm.
and then tried whatever new cool thing had come out. And when a couple of years ago, we surveyed the customers. We said, "Hey, what do you want us to build in the next year?" And like a ton of people said magnesium, and I was just like, "But why?"
Hmm.
There's like thousands of products. What are we gonna do that's different than anything that's ever been done before?
Hmm.
And lo and behold, the more I dug into it, the more I was actually very intrigued and interested, and the story kept getting deeper, and there were these gut connections and all this.
Hmm.
There's all this war between companies and between influencers around like who's more bioavailable. And like once I started to read all the research on that, I was like, oh, this is so fascinating, because the story's not, I don't think, at all what anybody wants it to be. And so, yeah. And so then the goal was, could we produce the most uh stomach like sensitive or gut sensitive, like a product for the sensitive gut people, that was like the best magnesium in the world. And I think we
Mm.
were able to do that with the absolutely no flows, no fillers, no nothing except for a capsule and the active ingredient.
I have to say, I love the product. I've been through about 7 bottles personally. And, I take 2 capsules instead of one that's on the suggested use on the bottle. I one I think is 180 milligrams. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm used to taking at least 350, so I thought 2 was my sweet spot. Well, how many do you
Yeah.
take? What's your dose?
I take 3 to 4 per
Oh
day.
wow, what time of day do you like to take it?
I take it close to bed, like if I can, or right before bed if I forget.
Yeah, yeah, me too, me too. It's perfect.
All at the same time. I don't spread it out.
Right, right. Three or
There's
four. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I mean the suggested use on the back of the bottle, that whole label back there is just that's FDA legal language. That's not
Hmm.
health advice. And so, one thing that our company really tries to stand for is that you need to experiment, be an adult. And if you're not comfortable experimenting, if you're not willing to like Google and learn nuance, then maybe don't experiment. Just listen to whatever your doctor says. But if
Yeah,
you if you're willing to be an adult and learn things, like maybe one is enough for you because of
yeah,
the way you eat or your genetic stock or where you live. But maybe for others like myself, due to my history, my level of stress, my thing, the different things that I have going on, 3 to 4 seems to be my sweet spot.
yeah. Do you have success combining it with other supplements? Because I do. I combine it with 4 other things and have no problem with that.
Yeah, zero problem.
Yeah, fantastic, fantastic. Um, so I also am a fan of high doses of greens. At the Gut Club, we promote especially arugula because it happens to top the dietary nitrate list for all foods, even more than beets. But chlorophyll is known to be the blood of plants. So, that's very similar to our blood. The difference is that, at the center of the molecule, um, it is magnesium instead of iron. So high doses of greens seem to be a good way to get dietary magnesium. Um, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't also supplement magnesium. I'm a big fan um, of thinking that supplementing magnesium is one of the few things that's really a no-brainer. Zinc as well. Um, I think zinc, needs to gain more popularity. Actually, it has during the pandemic. People are catching on to zinc these days, but several years ago, it was all about magnesium. It was the darling. Um, I remember when Carolyn Dean was so popular. She probably still is, uh, but people were learning so much about magnesium. A group on Facebook is probably still very active. I think over 100,000 people um, in that group. So just to protect from deficiency alone, because magnesium deficiency, when it rears its ugly head, it can it can really wreak havoc. So for that reason alone, but as a treatment, it seems to offer so much. I was reading today about lowering risk of diabetes and dementia. Now, if that's not enough, tell me what is. So magnesium deficiency, by the way, how can we know if we're magnesium deficient? What's your recommendation there?
It's a thorny subject. I don't love the answer I'm about to say. I wish there was something different for me to share, but um essentially there's no great way. And so like back when I was trained in functional medicine and I was deep in that area of the world, we went from, there was a big stink about moving from serum magnesium to red blood cell magnesium counts, and how, oh my gosh, these red blood cell count magnesium tests were they were the bee's knees. They were so much better than just doing the overall serum count. And and then when I got into the research here, I realized that less than 1% of all of the magnesium stores in your body are in the serum and the RBC test. And there is more percentage in the red blood cell test than in the serum test, but it's a very micro percentage of everything else. And unfortunately, there's conflicting data. There's never been like actual studies to say, does the RBC number, does your blood cell, does that correlate to, say, your bone storage, which is 53% of your entire body storage, or does it correlate with your muscle storage, which is 27%, or your heart, 19%? Like, we're like, this is where like a lot of the magnesium is at. It's in these actual organs. It's stored up in these other areas, and like we don't have any data suggesting that RBC is correlated to anything there. And so I would say that if you are doing you're in the magnesium rabbit hole, you're really just curious, I would get both tested at the same time. And if you see diverging data, that's super interesting, right? That should tell you that something you should probably supplement for sure. So for instance, let's say your RBC number is low, but your blood number is high. That would suggest that something odd is going on, but they should correlate. Like if everything was ideal, every one of those variables would correlate with one another, but that's not usually how the body works, and that's not usually how bodies kind of like break down when they decay.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of frustrating. I would say like if you're not in the upper reference range for those markers, then supplementation is like probably a no-brainer. If you're significantly above the reference range on those markers, then maybe back off a little bit or ask some more questions about what other micronutrients you might be missing. And at the end of the day, likely just playing around with different dosages and different forms of magnesium is going to offer you the best clarity around if you feel something or don't. And there's a lot of people out there who are trying to take the minimum, like I don't want to take a pill, I don't want to take an extra pill, or like whatever it might be. There's like I shouldn't have to take pills, things like this.
Mhm.
And the number of comments that we have and testimonials we have of people who I've been urging them like try two, try three, and they write in like, oh my gosh, like this changed or this changed. It's kind of shocking when you do hit like a saturation point with magnesium, and I think that's potentially true for other forms of magnesium as well, like magnesium malate or other high end forms like that.
Yeah, it seems like people can be misdirected by the tests. I know it could be similar to vitamin B12 testing, where people can test very high and think that they don't really need a B12 supplement when the results are actually suggestive of masking deficiency. So, with magnesium, um, magnesium deficiency seems so prevalent that it's just important to hedge our bets. And we don't really know what's in our food supply these days based on soil um, conditions. That actually relates to how magnesium is important in our body based on um, a huge environmental issue I wanted to mention, which is glyphosate. You know, Glyphosate works by way of actually inhibiting the process of tryptophan synthesis in plants. What they weren't counting on was that it also does the same thing to microbes. Um, you know, including eukaryotes, like fungi. So bacteria and fungi are affected by this chemical, and so this is a really important amino acid. The aromatic amino acids um, are lowered by glyphosate, but it just so happens that magnesium is crucial in the synthesis. We're sharing this pool of magnesium with our microbes. They need it as well. So that's another reason to supplement. We're sharing all the vitamins and minerals. And what's happening is that, in a world with these chemicals, we're impinging on our microbial synthesis of these important amino acids. And magnesium happens to be a cofactor in that, but also in the conversion of tryptophan to serotonin. So that's another key area. Um, what do you know about the enzyme activation? By the way, the family of enzymes that is known to help with butyrate synthesis that's dependent on magnesium, it's called MST, and the M is really about vitamin K. So that's we also know vitamin D um, requires magnesium to be effective. What what if you had to choose a couple of important reasons to take magnesium? What would they be? Uh, in terms of enzyme activation or anything.
I mean, you think and dive into those layers, much more often than I do, and so I don't have awesome pathway knowledge like that I can share. I mean, I think my conclusion is that the deficiency of magnesium, like you said, both for our microbes,
Mm-hmm.
as well as for our bodies, is like a significant side effect. Like it's a costly mistake that can be easily remedied, and many of those things end up being related to your brain or your gut. And so, when you look at the skyrocketing Alzheimer's dementia rates that are happening, if you look at cardiovascular disease and magnesium, and the just how heart attacks and atherosclerosis happens and things like that, the risk is like almost zero of taking a daily magnesium product. But should you fall into the deficiency camp,
Mm-hmm.
we know you're going to start to affect your microbes. You're going to cause, a loss of potentially a loss of diversity. That's what the mice studies say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we know that a loss of microbiome, increases aging. We know that it's associated with obviously every disease that I'm aware of. And then we know that, muscle or not muscle, but cardiovascular and magnesium and brain and magnesium are extremely important. And again, if you're just mildly deficient, that could have a logarithmic effect that we don't quite understand. And when the risk is so tiny from a money, time, and like the range of, it's not like fentanyl, right? There's not like a huge risk of overdose here. And
Mm-hmm.
so to me, that just makes it one of the no-brainer things if you're worried about your brain, your heart, or your gut.
Yeah, you'd think these days, with all the knowledge, that doctors would recommend magnesium to all their dementia patients. We have 70,000 of them here in Palm Beach County, Florida. By the way, where are you broadcasting from today?
We're traveling in Arizona right now.
Arizona. A lot of dementia patients in Arizona, I'm sure. They should all be on magnesium. There's no doubt about it. Let's talk about, another thing that's also prevalent in Parkinson's disease, constipation. People are using magnesium to address constipation, which is a subject that we take very seriously at the Gut Club. I haven't had, luckily, personal experience with it, but I know people and also pets that suffer constipation. It's a big gut brain issue. What's your take on how it works? So I have an idea about one of the pathways for why it works. What do you think about magnesium and why people take it to address constipation and motility?
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to our mind meld here on this. It's a very important subject for me, as
Mm-hmm.
I've needed to rely on it in the past. And I think it's a much better option. Any form of magnesium is a much better option than, say, polyethylene glycol, or any of the other very toxic laxatives out there.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
Miralax is well known to damage children and adults both. It's
yeah.
it's horrific. Um,
So, um, So I am of the belief, and this is just Steven Wright's theories and his thinking on the topic of magnesium, that the chelated compound with magnesium, especially when it comes to constipation, but also in terms of bioavailability and other things, is where the real story is. And so the reason why magnesium oxide is the number one used magnesium for constipation is because the oxide, the hydroxide molecule that it's chelated with or bonded with, it pulls in a bunch of water basically into the bowels, and that water concentration at some point that it will cause diarrhea. And low amounts of it can be perfect. They can be the perfect amount to get someone moving again. It just creates a motility wave, but it's a really tight window in my experience. That if you go over by 50 milligrams, even, you might be instead of just a regular bowel movement, you might be having explosive diarrhea, and nobody wants that. And so I think that's when magnesium citrate had a big rise, because citrate also pulls water into the bowels, but at a less of a rate than the oxide. And I think the window of tolerance in my experience is bigger. So you could miss by 200 milligrams and not have an explosion or something. But if you miss by 250, if you hit that window, you will cause a diarrhea. And you could also cause consturia, which is basically where you're having sort of diarrhea around the actual stool. The stool is kind of still staying in your body. And so personally, I don't love those methods if you can avoid them, because it's a little, anytime you're kind of putting in a crutch for the long term with the body, there's going to be ramifications. There will be feedback loops that will develop that could cause issues. And so that's where something like a magnesium glycinate dosed at a higher level, it doesn't draw the water in, but it does seem to potentially affect the enteric nervous system, and or the glycine affects the microbes as well as the gut cells enough
Mhm.
that people do have a stool softening effect at, say, 4 or 6 caps a day, to help them with that.
Very interesting stuff. I've been focusing on how microbes synthesize tryptophan, um, and how it's a magnesium dependent process, as well as I mentioned earlier, the conversion to serotonin. It just so happens that serotonin at high levels in the gut derived serotonin is associated with diarrhea, and low levels constipation. So maybe when we take magnesium, we're helping that process. Uh, and perhaps it's raising gut derived serotonin. I need to look further into that. Um, but tryptophan is a big subject when it comes to motility, but also gut brain axis. So, associating magnesium with tryptophan seems like a powerful construct to learn more about. It's amazing stuff. Um, by the way, a quick shout out to Laura at Healthy Gut Company. Thank you very much for putting this together for Steven and I today. We are offering a discount on the product, Magnesium HP. So we're not here just to talk about magnesium. We're here to push products, of course. And you can get a $15 discount and free shipping. I think it's a great deal. Actually, this product is quite cost effective when you compare it to other forms of magnesium uh, out there. It's quite competitive. So I like to think of it as the bargain of your product line, Stephen. I'm also a big fan of Holoimmune. We've done a couple of podcasts about Holoimmune. I'm still a big fan of this product. It's a paraprobiotic. Um, I've used the Tributyrin X, but I have a large number of butyrate producers, and I don't think it really affected me much. So the two main products of yours that I'm really a big fan of and happy to have in my toolbox are Magnesium HP and Holoimmune. I might try the new DAO supplement. It's about lowering histamine. Um, again, I'm not sure if that would apply to me personally, but maybe I'll notice things like improved respiratory function, like I do with Holoimmune. Could be quite welcoming. And I've had allergies in the past. One of my favorite jokes is when Dr. Kaplan died in the 1960s, who was giving me allergy shots. I didn't need shots anymore.
Of
So
course.
yeah, that was in the 1960s. So anyway, um, why
So
don't go ahead.
so I just want to mention something. I think it's really interesting. Like, magnesium chloride is often topically applied as well. Like
Yes.
there's the topical magnesiums that are mostly magnesium chloride, and
Hmm.
those can be, you know, we have some at the house. We use them from time to time if I'm very stressed and I'm trying to figure out a way to de-stress. I think they work. I think my wife, Shay, feels it more than I do.
Hmm.
Um, but I do wonder if like for instance, I would wonder if for you, if you tried like a pure magnesium malate, if you noticed increased energy, because part of there is a magnesium component here. I think that potentially people are getting not enough actual magnesium from the supplements they're taking, which is, you know, ours is potent. Like you said, it's 2 capsules. That's 360 milligrams of elemental magnesium in and of itself, which is much more than most companies out there. And then, but then the chelated compound, I think, does interesting. It introduces an interesting secondary benefactor, which is most people who take magnesium malate report increased energy. And I think that potentially they have a malic acid deficiency.
Hmm.
And malic acid can be used for ATP production and mitochondrial health. And so
Hmm.
I do wonder if you know, maybe in the future, if you were partially glycine deficient or something, and so maybe in the future you'll be like, hey, you know, I don't know if the benefits are still there, and you'll switch to magnesium malate. And so I think there's something to testing the different products. But when it comes to
Hmm.
like relaxation, just pure magnesium reloading, gut benefit, I don't see a better option out there other than a high dose magnesium glycinate.
Yeah. Well, actually, I mentioned earlier that's what attracted me to the product, was thinking that I might benefit from the extra glycine. I mean, that's another big subject having to do with things like liver detox. Um, there's so much to it. There, from a microbial standpoint, it's fascinating to me. I learned this a while ago that in bile acid processing by microbes, there's a preference of glycine by lactobacillus and bifidobacteria over taurine. That's a pretty big sales point, I think. I mean, what's your take on glycine? In fact, I'm also using now. I switched over to a form of boron that's a glycine boron. Um,
I think
so,
it's I think it's very likely that many of us are mildly glycine deficient and or really glycine deficient.
mhm.
And again, it's one of those things where like it's hard to overdo it, but the upsides are really big. So there's credible research on glycine for sleep. It helps lower your core body temperature, helps you feel more rested in the morning, according to the research on humans. But also glycine just for generalized like the gut cell health, like the actual thickness of your mucosa, as well as actual cellular gut help or gut health help. If you're deficient at all, it's a very important amino acid that begins to downregulate things. And then of course, yeah, if you start to break down what is it going to do to the lactobacillus, the bifidobacter, how does that impact the actual microbial communities? It wouldn't surprise me if, you know, we start to see data that, you know, low glycine diets have some sort of effect there. Just like, you know, it'd be great to find out if there's a if people did a magnesium supplementation, if their bifidobacter went up, you know, if we could replicate those mice studies in humans, it'd be fascinating.
there is actually an interesting study. I'm not sure I can do it justice right now, but in magnesium deficiency, bifidobacteria lowered, but at a later point, they were raised, I think at the 21-week point. And that was thought to be about lowering enzyme activation, meaning the host was not able to then digest its food and more was left behind to the microbes. So,
Yeah.
you'd think that that might be, a reason to be magnesium deficient, but no, I wouldn't recommend it. Because high bifidobacteria is actually a thing and it's associated with inflammation. Even the ketogenic diet is known to lower high bifidobacteria. So, it's
Yeah,
all about.
you do need magnesium in the pancreas to manufacture enzymes in the pancreas. So
Mhm.
if you're deficient there, you could, you know, reasonably assume there's likely a pancreatic enzyme deficiency that could develop.
Yeah, that's one of the things I was learning about sugar um, metabolism and insulin sensitivity related to magnesium. I mean, it takes a lot of molecules. I don't remember the numbers right now, but a lot of molecules of magnesium to handle one molecule of glucose.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's that struck me years ago when I was a fan of Carolyn Dean talking about magnesium. I think that was one of her messages as well. So just protecting against uh, diabetes, if you're pre-diabetic, which most of us are, then taking a magnesium supplement, according to the research, is protective. It's interesting stuff. Um, One point that I want to hammer home today is about how magnesium helps to detox lipopolysaccharides. That's LPS, the cell wall of gram-negative bacteria. So, that's another big reason I think to take magnesium, just to protect
Does
it
it
against.
bind to it, or does it upregulate, some enzyme function?
I'm going to have to report back to you on that and what the mechanism is. But there are several papers about it. In fact, I've been building a landing page. Let me share that page with you. We can go through a few things. Um, Share a screen. Here it is. Yeah, here's our new page about Magnesium HP. Again, you can get a $15 discount and free shipping. The first thing that and we'll get to the LPS question too. I'll show you a couple papers. The first thing I wanted to get across is that microbes have their own pumps. Actually, the pump is here in orange, and this right here is the cell wall of bacteria. It could be that magnesium deficiency is about microbial overgrowth taking our magnesium. The same could be said of other vitamins and minerals. So, have you heard that before, Stephen? That they have their own pumps?
I didn't know they had their own pumps, but I've heard the various ideas and theories that, for instance, overgrowths of certain species may be uh, protectionary mechanisms to binding certain, both beneficial compounds and non-beneficial compounds. But like there's always a reason kind of thinking, like if you're deficient, maybe there's a bloom of a microbial community that's getting it before you do. But I've also heard that, potentially some heavy metals might be bound by certain species as well. And so, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that there's a pump here. There's a mechanism to make this happen. And I think this is where we get into these random feedback loops, right? Where it's just so hard to say, um, are you deficient? Are you not? And more of your felt experience might be important, or your felt experience of your bacteria's felt experience. I don't know.
Yeah. Here's an article about it from 2016. That was striking when I learned that. Uh, so we're sharing the pool of nutrients, as mentioned earlier. Um, we've got several photo explorations on the Gut Club Facebook page, and also some on our group page. By the way, anyone out there would like to join our group, the Gut Club Stool Test Discussion Group, we've got almost 14,000 people right now, and several thousand are pretty active and brilliant. As a hive mind, people are looking at their um, at 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 stool test charts. Oops, I'm not signed in here. Okay. Anyway, this was our first magnesium post in 2017. This is actually crystallized magnesium. And this is one of the hubs where I collect information. We've got probably 100 comments with different papers. I, that's how we operate on the main Facebook page. So here we'll run through a quick list here. Um, it's predominantly absorbed in the small intestine, magnesium. There is some research showing that magnesium is mainly absorbed in the distal small intestine. That would be the ileum, the last section, the third section. But then there's other newer research suggesting it's mainly absorbed throughout the small intestine. So that's where microbial balance is key. And of course, stool testing is more suggestive of what's happening in the colon. Um, but it's interesting stuff because sometimes results can suggest low, for instance, lactobacillus in the small intestine. Um, and here's an interesting thing. It's known to, we talked about reducing toxicity to lipopolysaccharides. There are several papers. Interaction in mitochondria and
That's cool. So
toxicity.
it's not
Yeah,
in the gut, it's in the
right,
body.
right, right. Then there was also in the placenta and the maternal fetal interface. That's a pretty interesting subject. Um, yeah, this was magnesium sulfate, but preventing LPS-induced cell death in the placenta of humans. Wow. Similar in the heart. You mentioned the heart earlier. Protective magnesium supplementation, against LPS in the heart. Fascinating. Did you know ketones are also produced in the heart and regulated by microbes
I did
and
not.
and protective? Uh, but deficiency, on the other hand, can heighten LPS-induced inflammation. So that confirms it. When the first thing I like to look at, Stephen, when I see a stool test, is the Firmicutes to Bacteroidetes ratio and the level of proteobacteria, so we can get a sense of gram-negative bacteria and whether or not it's dominant. When you see that, this is still controversial as to whether or not, uh, dominant gram-negative bacteria is really what constitutes dysbiosis. But when you look at all the literature, I think it's something that we should settle on and agree to. I think people who don't see it that way and they say, well, there's no, such thing as knowing what a good balance looks like. I think they're not really paying attention. So it's just the fact that magnesium is helpful in reducing LPS-induced inflammation. That's huge, I think. Also inhibiting binding of pathogenic bacteria, pathogenic E. coli in this in that research. Guarding against microbial overgrowth. We talked about this. This was actually the bifidobacteria overgrowth that was seen in magnesium deficiency. That paper. That's a separate photo that I posted earlier this year, even though we posted it probably 7 years ago. I never really understood it until recently. I thought it was about, Bifido raising as a way to compensate for inflammation in magnesium deficiency. And only recently learned the author's view, which was lowering enzyme activation to improve, to actually hinder digestion, leaving more food for the microbes. So interesting that prebiotics were found to raise magnesium 23%. So that's again about, that's interesting. That's seen in a couple of studies. This one goes back to 2012, maybe more than a couple, because actually probiotics also were found to increase magnesium absorption in bone. So, that's interesting that magnesium would be raised in bone by probiotics. Vitamin D3, by the way, are also raised by probiotics. So this is an interesting microbiota gut magnesium axis example. Would you ever suspect this, Stephen, that probiotics could raise magnesium levels in bone?
If you would have told me that probiotics somehow affected bone, either bone formation or bone breakdown, I would have said yes. But if you'd said it was through magnesium, I couldn't have guessed that. Yeah, maybe it is through the short chain fatty acids because butyrate does play a pretty curious role with bone.
Exactly. Exactly. So, in fact, we did a podcast on muscle, and I think we talked a little bit about skeletal health and magnesium. That's such an important area. In fact, here's a paper about skeletal health. Uh, all the cofactors as well as magnesium supplementation, um, and skeletal health from 2020. So fascinating stuff. This is also about blood sugar we mentioned, and reducing risk of diabetes, oral magnesium supplementation treating glucose metabolism. Um, Another paper about that. Higher magnesium intake reduces risk of impaired glucose and insulin metabolism. Huge issue considering I think almost half of Americans now are considered pre-diabetic.
Yeah, it's quite a few. I don't know if
Here,
it's true, but I heard someone say that up to 80% of Americans now are or overweight or obese, so makes
80%?
sense. Someone said it. I haven't fact checked that
Wow.
yet.
I've seen 50%. I haven't seen 80%. That's shocking. Um, Here's what we talked about earlier, tryptophan. Um, and this paper is about magnesium supplementation in autism and improving tryptophan status. So also, I thought this was fascinating about how magnesium was associated with enhancing diversity of gut microbes, which is a key area. Diversity isn't all it's chalked up to be. Actually, in some situations, diversity is not what you want. For instance, in vaginal microbiota and also in the infant gut. But in general, for adults, of course, diversity is key, and that magnesium can help. That is a fascinating area. I'd like to look more into that. Um, so also, here's a fascinating area: reducing arthritis. Do you know much about this?
No, I don't think I've seen that one,
Yeah,
but
that's just interesting. The way, and it's increasing. Uh, it's actually mediated by gut microbes that are regulating the immune response. In this case, Treg cells, T regulatory cells, and how that's reducing symptoms of arthritis.
which is really cool.
Yeah,
And Treg cells are needed for any sort of autoimmune condition or inflammatory condition.
yeah. Um, Medium chain fatty acids also, by way of microbial fermentation, are about magnesium, not just the short chain fatty acids. Um, Reducing risk of dementia. That's huge. A couple articles I'll show you real quickly. If that headline speaks volumes. A
Was
higher
that the
dose.
500 milligram one?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I have to look at that. Um, I'm not sure. I'll have to report back to you on that. Um, Also, this paper. Yeah, that's a different paper. This one's from 2023. So just last year, there was a new paper about higher magnesium. This might be the 500 milligram one. I'll look into that. Um, so inversely related to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, magnesium intake. Seems pretty important. I know that sounds trite, but still. This is interesting how magnesium can regulate antiviral immunity by way of interferon response and via vitamin D, whereas a deficiency of magnesium compromises vitamin D. This is really important. Magnesium regulates antiviral immunity. Um, so, we're also looking about interferon response is a big deal in SARS-2 infection. That's like our main antiviral pathway. If you are enjoying natural immunity, unfortunately, the genetic injections are known to create a reprogramming of interferon response to the point of absent and reduced interferon response. But magnesium would be one of the supplements if you are wanting to promote natural immunity, which to me is defined by microbial balance. Let's see. Low magnesium make vitamin D ineffective. That seems pretty profound. And also crosstalk with lipids. This is an interesting area. Magnesium is known to regulate lipid balance. That's something I need to learn a lot more about. I think it can lower cholesterol. Probably.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yeah. It can protect against high levels of lipids, hyperlipidemia, dietary magnesium intake. That's seen in diabetes. Also, hypertension. That's not coming up quickly enough. We'll go
I
back.
mean, I think the interesting thing here is that, as you run through all these is just how it's, almost everywhere they look, there's a component to magnesium deficiency, and there's no money to study magnesium supplementation really. There's hardly any data on human supplementation with extra magnesium for outcomes. And I hope that we could figure that out in the future. Like it sucks because the mechanisms are there, and understanding what the right dosage would be is so interesting, because you think about those people who might, they're taking 10,000 IUs of vitamin D3 a day, and their vitamin D3 numbers aren't, or their vitamin D numbers are not going up in serum, and maybe it's just because they needed 180 milligrams of magnesium, and then suddenly they're 50 nanograms per deciliter or something.
Wow.
I don't know if I think that's theoretically possible, but we have no data to know, in that population, if that's what they're missing.
So interesting. Here's what I mentioned earlier about being a cofactor in tryptophan metabolism and synthesis, the MST enzymes, which includes vitamin K. So this is part of the shikimate pathway that's infamously inhibited by glyphosate. And then I mentioned conversion to serotonin. Here's a paper about that within this paper about stress and magnesium. Have you ever found benefit to a magnesium supplementation lowering stress? I
100%.
really I find that with B complex.
And I guess by stress, I'm saying like anxiety or felt
Mhm.
perception. So I take extra magnesium on the way to the airport. Um, I take when I take 4 pills of magnesium, it's on an extra stressful day.
Mhm.
Yeah, I feel it for sure.
Fantastic. Congratulations. So yeah, I mentioned vitamin K. Also, this this is another paper about the MST family of enzymes. They call it a mystery because the world's still learning about these things. In fact, let's end up on a topic that I find interesting about magnesium. I learned recently that from a planetary perspective, magnesium could be responsible for powering Earth's magnetic field. It's the way it interacts with iron. And of course, when I look at these planetary, findings, I'm also interested in how that might be taking place in the body. And that's an interesting hypothesis that maybe, iron absorption, which is also about microbes, um, combined with magnesium, is doing something to power blood flow, because there is an actual theory that the heart is not a pump. Have you heard this before? The heart's not really a pump that we think of it as.
Yeah, what was that book called? I read the whole book. It was fascinating. The Vortex.
Okay, I haven't seen that.
Um,
I'll have to check that out. So,
yeah,
well, what is a pump? Maybe it's the gut, because first of all, there is some reason to believe that blood is actually created via the gut and not the bone, as commonly considered. That's a different topic. I need to see the latest on that. But I found this paper a couple of years ago, um, about microbiota-driven inter-organ transport, and this is an electrical issue. So, this is, and as humans, Stephen, we do actually have a magnetic field. I mean, surrounding us.
right.
It's just
Yeah, the
great.
book, if anybody's interested in, I would recommend it. It's a fascinating concept, and I mean, maybe he is right. It's Dr. Thomas Cohen, Kowan, and it's called Human Heart, Cosmic Heart, and it's an entire book around laying out all the data that the heart is not a pump, and
Wow.
it's a I read it like, oh shoot, 6 or 7 years ago, and I hadn't thought about it until you had brought up the magnesium and iron today. So I
Yeah.
can't I can't speak anything to it in the moment other than just being absolutely fascinated by
You know,
it.
there are videos of high school experiments using magnesium and iron where they actually combine them and take what was once not magnetic, and within a matter of minutes, the chemical reaction creates a magnetic property in that combination, where magnesium actually binds with iron. It's,
Cool.
yeah, it's wild stuff. So you have to wonder about the body electric, and it's that's
Yeah, there's whole fields to that. I think we'll be deeper into that in the future, and any mineral that impacts electricity movement inside the cells and even between the cells is going to be,
mm,
that's where those micro uh potentially one of the theories is one of where you have these micro deficiencies that don't register as macro deficiencies, but could be very important to overall health.
I would bet, Stephen, that it's a magnesium dependent process. You know,
If
if you
I
look
mean,
if you look at the word magnesium, actually, of course it's suggestive of the word magnetic, but that's not really where it comes from. It comes from a town, called Magnesia, that was named after the people, and it's about the rock, the stone that's in this town, as well. So, but I think there might be more to it. Maybe they had some kind of prescient thought about the magnetic properties of magnesium. I don't know. I don't know.
yeah,
Just something fun to think about.
definitely.
So thank you very much, Stephen. Please, if anyone would like to order from Healthy Gut Company, there'll be a link to order. You'll get $15 off and free shipping.
In the US only. Internationally, you still got to pay for shipping, but you get the
Okay.
the discount.
Okay. Well, they deserve it for not living in the United States. Our great company leading the world.
Yeah, yeah. Hopefully, people give it a shot. I mean, I know magnesium glycinate is not something that people have gotten just excited about before. But I do swear to you, and I think the price, especially with the discount, is just ridiculously cheap. But it's already pretty
Mhm.
cheap because we're able to make some breakthroughs in our manufacturing partners to lower the cost. But if you compare our magnesium glycinates to the other stuff on the market. Now, the practitioner grade products are good products, but the rest of the products are a lot of there's a lot of real junk out there where when you when you flip over the bottle, they're kind of violating FDA law and they're not labeling it based on elemental magnesium. And when you do the calculation or they do show it, it's like, 60 or 70 or 80 milligrams. And again, every one of our pills is 180 milligrams of elemental magnesium. And so there's this idea that, oh, I've tried that supplement. But what I'm saying is that like one or two standard doses, like two of our capsules, which is what I would consider the standard dose. That's why it's in a 60 capsule bottle, is 2 per day is the standard dose that I would say at a minimum. That could be 3 to 4 times what you've ever taken before. And so I'm saying that that could
Yes.
definitely matter.
Yeah, the dose and the form make a big difference in
Yeah.
in all supplements. No doubt about it. Thanks again, Steven, for all you do and all you've done. You've got a long history in the gut health field. And I know that it's personally motivated, so that makes it even better. So thank you very much. I wish you the best in your travels in Arizona. Today, when are you heading home?
Next week.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
One more event this weekend.
fantastic. Okay. Thanks again, Steven. We'll talk more about magnesium later. There's so much to talk about.
All right. Thanks, Keith.
Okay. Okay. The Gut Club out. Cue the music. Magneto and Titanium Man. Oh no, we've been hit with copyright infringement. Take care, everybody. Peace.